You choose who you are in this life. Forget the past, live in the present, look forward to the future. And in grappling, it's a different kind of mentality, and I think it's a different kind of camaraderie. You are trusting that person not to hurt you. 89, I had my first Gracie Jiu-Jitsu experience, and it was like, wow, this is what I've been looking for, and I found I loved it. We all love doing Jiu-Jitsu, but you can't train hard every day. Really, if you're training hard more than 3 times a week, it's too much, man. You're never gonna last. Tap early, tap often. I'm really big into super slow and isometrics. The number of reps mean nothing, it's the time under load. What the fast explosive reps do is wear and tear on the joint.
The reason you're here every year is because you are a nomad.
No home base, nada. Knowledge is money. When I discovered that, it was like, wow, let's go. I've been doing this almost more than 10 years. It's a long time. So I'm going to move to this little tiny house in a very rural area, and I'm going to set up an exercise studio. I try to be the best person I can be. I'll make the smallest carbon footprint. I'll do my part for global warming. And I'm not a vegetarian, but imagine if everyone stopped eating so much beef. Even just everyone in the world, one day a week would go vegan. What if we all just started walking and riding our bikes? What if we all put solar panels in our house? Let's all do it. Let's each, every individual, try to take responsibility. We got to contribute to the good of all.
The world is changing. Inspiration is everywhere. It has never been so easy to connect, share, and bring people together. We're learning from others and finding the best in ourselves. Challenging our beliefs. Sharing our vulnerability. Overcoming our fears. Transforming ourselves so we can transform the world. How far can we go?
This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is...
What I love about Steve Maxwell is he's got that twinkle in his eye, and at 66 years old, he feels like he has more youthful energy than a man 40 years younger. And Steve has been in the personal fitness and martial arts game for so long. He was training with the Gracie family in Jujitsu before the UFC even was created. In fact, he invested $10,000 of his own money in the UFC that became a $5 billion company. But he's more than that. He's about how to show you how you can change your workout routine, how to understand mobility, how to understand strength training, so you can live your whole life and keep using your body. And at 66 years old, I spent time with him on the mat in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Steve can hold his own, but he's also got an amazing mindset of positive thinking, of affirmations, and that's what actually keeps him young. So I know you're gonna enjoy this episode. Pay attention to everything Steve said. His mind is just as impressive as his body. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Steve Maxwell, the American fitness guru, author, physical educator, breathing coach, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. You've been named one of the top 10 trainers in the USA by Men's Journal and spend your time traveling around the world with just one duffel bag, teaching students like Joe Rogan about mobility, strength training, martial arts, and more. You received your black belt in Jiu-Jitsu from one of the renowned Brazilian trainers, Relson Gracie, and were the first American certified to teach Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. Steve, welcome back to London Real.
Number 5.
5.
Wow.
It's crazy.
Can you believe it's been that long?
Well, every year you come back, and I always tell people, Steve Maxwell books the next episode when you're here.
One year event.
1 year ahead, because you come back, because you're traveling the world and teaching people. And so we've done this almost every year. Last year we did the hotel workout instead, which, nearly broke the internet with you and me, you know, taking our clothes off and scrubbing ourselves and fixing our eyes. And we just got
Training using furniture in the hotel.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was great. And we just got done training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so we're going to post that video as well. And Steve just went through a whole Gracie defense system. It was a lot of fun, man. Thank you for that.
I had a lot of fun too, man. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm very humbled. You know, when I see the quality of your guests, wow, I feel like little Petey from down the street. You get some real amazing people on the show, and I'm really grateful that you include me amongst those people.
Well, my pleasure, man. It's always great having you here. And like I always tell people, like, Steve, you got this twinkle in your eye that is like from a 25-year-old man. You know, you got this twinkle in your eye. You're always like, you know, you're just excited. You're always fresh. You're always like, hey, Brian, what's going on? Let's do this. And you know, maybe you got to share that with us while you're here. How you keep that twinkle going?
That life force, the life energy.
Yeah, it's more than just okay. You're still moving. You're very active. You know, you just did train me in jiu-jitsu, but like you're just still living life, right? Almost like it's new to you, right?
I like to make every day like the last day of my life. Every day is the first day of my life, but I always think of it also as the last day of the life.
Wow.
So I try to live it pretty full if I can.
And you just have that mindset to where
I have that mindset.
Okay.
I do a lot of meditation and mindfulness exercises, and you know, I actually work on that life energy, that life force. I've had some really good teachers myself.
Okay.
I practice, you know, various forms of Taoist yoga and Qigong, and along with the Russian Slavic health system, and kind of created this little Steve Maxwell system. And I think those exercises really keep me feeling pretty energetic, pretty spry.
Yeah.
But, you know, we all get old. We all slow down.
And you're turning 67 this year.
67 this year.
This year?
Yeah.
Okay.
December 3rd.
Not mentally mobile.
Well, a lot of times, you know, you start to get aches and pains, and pain can make you very negative, and you get, you know, complaining and negativity and so forth. One of my missions, though, is to try to help people free themselves from pain. This idea that you have to age in a way that you end up crippled on a walker or a cane or end up in a wheelchair, I don't believe it has to be that way. That being said, my own elderly relatives are a real cautionary tale. I mean, in my family tree, I can see what would await me if I didn't take steps to correct it. So I take great steps so I don't end up like grandma and granddad and even my own parents, really.
Heart disease, or what is it?
Yeah, heart disease, a lot of arthritis in the family.
Okay.
A lot of arthritis. I have some arthritis. You can't play sports like wrestling and jiu-jitsu and play hard like that without ending up with some dings and some injuries and things.
Okay. But every day you're proactive.
But I'm very proactive. I believe in this exercise system I've created for prevention. It's like preventative medicine.
Okay.
Really strenuous with my diet, really strict. I just am very, very strict.
Okay. Maybe we should talk about some of that. I want to talk about that. First, I want to say you were just training with Horry and Gracie recently.
Yes, he's like a kid himself.
And he's what, in his 70s or what?
No, he's like a year older than me, but he looks like a kid.
Okay.
Still young, has that twinkle in his eye, very spry. I did a private one-on-one, and I was doing all the throws on him, and I was trying to take it easy on him. And he said, no, you know, if you try to slow it down and put the brakes on, that's the way you'll do it in real life. I want you to really throw me. But the way the guy lands, he's like a feather. He just lands in such a way that he's not hurt. It was really quite amazing.
And this was at the Torrance Academy?
Yeah, the old Gracie Academy.
Okay, gotcha.
He's not part of Henner and Huron's thing.
Okay.
He's still like doing his own thing.
And
he's had like 3 families, I think. He's like me.
Right. Okay.
Married and divorced 3 times.
Right.
Horion's had his go with a couple different generations.
Okay, that's
So
like
he
a
has
Gracie
a whole
thing.
new crop of young blue and purple butts coming up.
Okay, and Elio Gracie was training way into his 80s and stuff, right?
Oh, he was still getting the mat in his 90s.
90s. And the movie Choke, which is an incredible movie, everyone should go watch it. He's training with Hickson, and he's probably, I don't know if maybe he's in his 90s at that point, but it's fun to watch him.
He probably was in his 80s around that point, I
Okay.
think.
And you knew him, and you went down to his house in Brazil?
I went and actually stayed with him for a month.
Wow.
And he was also at the Gracie Academy quite a bit.
And for people that don't know, who is Helio Gracie?
Elliot Gracie took Japanese Judo, Jiu-Jitsu. The terms were almost synonymous. Judo, Jiu-Jitsu. The Brazilians continue to call it Jiu-Jitsu. But it was like the old Kodokan style. There was self-defense movements, defenses against punch, kicks, weapons defenses, all the throws of modern judo, and a lot of ground fighting. They knew just about everything we know today. There was nothing new under the sun. And what Elio did was he polished up the Japanese system a little bit.
Because he met Maeda.
He met Maeda.
Who traveled from Japan down to...
He traveled all through Europe,
Okay.
through Cuba, through Mexico, down through South America. And Maeda was a mighty fighter. I think there's a book on Amazon now called The Toughest Man Alive or something about Maeda's history.
Okay.
And he was the direct line to the Gracie family from Japan.
Okay. And
He was there. He didn't actually teach Elio. He taught Elio's older brother, Carlos, and Carlos taught his younger brother. But Elio had a real mind for it. And being small and not particularly strong, he also had a mind for adapting the moves to smaller, weaker people. And Elio's idea was to create a style of martial arts and self-defense that little people and people that weren't athletic could still defend themselves.
Right.
Businessmen, housewives, people that were not athletes, non-athletic. And what really differentiates his style of jiu-jitsu, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, is the teaching style. He created this very interesting teaching system.
Which is what? How would you describe that?
Well, kind of what I did with you today. You introduce step by step, you introduce the movement patterns, and then you show the combat application. You start with real simple things like we did today, and you just build on that foundation. And notice how we would stop and repeat the first move we did and the second, and then we'd add a third move. And then we'd go back and review the first, the second, the third. That kind of repetition is really good to get it in the nervous system. Also notice I kept saying slow down, slow down. They were really, really big into slow motion.
Okay.
And it's interesting because as far as I know, he didn't have any education other than maybe high school. And I studied motor learning at university. I was a health and physical education major at Westchester State University. It was renowned PE school. And that is solid motor learning. This is the way you teach skills to people.
Slow.
And somehow he figured this out on his own. Slow motion, and you just keep repeating. First move, then you add the second move. Then you get back to the first move. Then the second, and now the third. And then you get back to the first. And you never overload the student with too many moves. If you do 3 to 4 moves, that's a lot.
That's probably a big mistake in martial arts or jiu-jitsu today, because the guys come in and they want to do the inverted heel hook, and you're like, wait a second, let's figure out how to get up and get down, and let's work on the basics.
Let's start with the basics and build from there.
Okay.
I do understand the desire to just jump in there. You see the MMA on TV now and all the videos, and the young guys get excited. They want to just jump right into it, but it's a mistake. It's going to really impair your learning. And a lot of guys, they find that they struggle with some of these moves in the beginning. Some of them actually jump in there and find they don't have the knack for it. But I believe if you have a really good teacher, even a guy that's not particularly coordinated or doesn't have the knack, you can still teach those guys if you're patient and you do it step by step by step. If you really want to experience the traditional Elio Gracie style, you got to go to North Miami, where the Valenti brothers are, Valenti Brothers Jiu-Jitsu. They were the last people to directly get their black belts directly from Master Elio.
Okay.
And of course, Horry and his grandsons, and Hiron, of course, Hickson, Relson, Hoyce, these were the people that are carrying on Elio's legacy.
Right.
And they teach that old school. Of course, I got to mention Horry and Gracie in San Diego.
Yeah, he's amazing. And so Elio, and also this system was born in Rio de Janeiro, right?
It was.
And that's worth saying because there's a little flavor of the city in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu,
A
right?
little flavor.
Because it's not the safest place. I mean, I actually did some good evasion when I was in Rio. Like 2 kids rolled up to me on Copacabana, and they did, because Steve was teaching me today what it's like when someone gets in your space and you don't know what's going on. And they came up asking me like what time it was. And it soon became really apparent that they wanted my wallet.
Yes, they did.
And I got the hell out of Dodge.
It's all about awareness, man.
Yeah, but like the Rio de Janeiro flavor, and I love Rio, by the way. I was lucky enough to train at Gracie Baja. I trained with the Brazilian top team guys, Murilo Bustamante, and all those guys. Really fortunate.
Fantastic guys.
Love those guys. And
Mario Sperry, perhaps?
yeah, Mario Sperry was there.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a crazy story. I went down to Rio for the first time. I think it was 2006. And I had emailed Brazilian top team because I've been watching the Pride videos, and they were like, somebody replied like, "Yeah, come on by." And I found it. It was really hard to find. It was a place called the AABB, which was the Athletic Association, right on the lake there between Ipanema and Copacabana.
The lagoon there.
Yeah, the lagoon. And I walk in this place. It was like an athletic association with tennis courts, and you go in the back, and there's this mat. And on the mat, I kid you not, both the Nogueira brothers are rolling. Anderson Silva's rolling. Mario Sperry, Murilo Bustamante, and Ricardo Arona
Like
are
a who's
all on the
who.
same mat rolling. And I was just like, are you kidding me? And I was watching Pride Fighting Champions. And these were basically the greatest
These
MMA
are the guys,
fighters
man.
in the world. And I was just like, and I went up to Bustamante. I was like, you got my email? And he said, what email? And I was like, oh, I'm Brian from America. I want to train. He's like, okay, let's train. So it just...
And they're just like as friendly, and as common as an old shoe.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, they're so
Very
friendly.
non-arrogant, friendly, relaxed.
They invited me to their belt ceremony that night. I got some pictures with Nogueira. I mean, Nogueira was legend back then.
I mean, how cool was that? How cool
It was
was
amazing.
that?
So I was
there with
super
your
fortunate.
heroes, man.
There with my hero, and I used to go and I trained Gracie Baja with the gi, and then I trained there. But still, as I told you today, I was nervous every time I'd go into a class or something because it was still strange.
Well, it's good
for
to be
me.
a little nervous.
It is good.
What do you do in jiu-jitsu? Well, you choke a person unconscious.
Yeah, to death.
Or you twist their arm
Till it
to the
breaks.
point till, you either submit or something pops. And, in the Gracie self-defense, there are strikes. We didn't do strikes today, but I showed you where you could put strikes. There are kicks and slaps and chops, palm heels. We don't use closed fist that much.
Because it's
More
dangerous.
open hand. You can break your hand
break
pretty
fingers,
easy.
yeah.
We're not boxers or karate guys.
Yeah, you had some nice little palm strikes that were kind of
Palm
nasty.
strikes are all there.
Yeah.
But, the point is you are basically taking your body and putting it in the care of someone else. You are trusting that person not to hurt you. But you get a person that doesn't have good motor skills or good motor control, or maybe he's just kind of a jerk, you could really get badly hurt. So you're basically, putting yourself in danger to learn this particular martial art. Now, 99% of the time, people are wonderful.
Yeah.
That's why I insisted that you go slow motion until you can really feel.
Yeah.
Because if you try to do stuff too fast, people can get really hurt.
Yeah, no,
That's
true.
why slow is really important.
I still remember those first times. Like when I first went to Copacabana for the first time, like every day I had to psych myself up to go to Gracie Baja for the class. And I was terrified. And I would just be like, you gotta go. And I'd get there super nervous. And I'd just be like, all right, just do it. And then roll. And I'd get through it. And that was like a huge win. And then I go back the next day and the next day. But look, it always works out well. Everyone's super
And you always
friendly.
feel so good after you're
You
done.
feel so good afterwards. You got a great workout. You met some amazing people. You
Always a
learned
good
so
sweat.
much. Yeah.
Always some good calorie burn. You always feel.
Yeah, you get some acai afterwards. And it doesn't get any better than that.
No,
you go,
it doesn't.
you get a coconut, you drink that on the beach. It just doesn't get any better. And
in grappling, it's a different kind of mentality, and I think it's a different kind of camaraderie.
yeah,
I mean,
As opposed
I've
to
taken
striking.
karate and Muay Thai, and the mother art of Muay Thai is Bondo. I've trained in that. There's something different about actually punching someone as opposed to grappling and rolling around and each other's sweat and everything.
Very much
I mean,
so.
you develop a kind of closeness that you don't get in the striking arts. At least that's what I found.
yeah, because you're close. I mean, you're holding your bodies next to each other. It's like I don't know. There's something weird going on there. Whereas with
It's like puppies or kittens,
yeah,
It
is
rolling around and grappling. I mean, if you think about it, most of the apex predators are grapplers.
That's how they practice.
Even killer whales, they grapple. There was an amazing
play with their
video
prey.
of a mother killer whale, orca, teaching her calf how to hunt great white sharks. It's one of the few apex predators that can take out a great white. And they actually caught it. It was a New Zealand boat trip. And this killer whale struck it from underneath, grabbed the shark by the snout, and turned it over. And sharks have to continuously swim in order to breathe. Right. And she held it there until it suffocated. A choke. She choked it out. And then she opened it, and her and the little calf ate the liver. It was a teaching. She was teaching the baby how to hunt.
Okay.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah, that is wild.
Yeah.
So that's what the apex predators do, and we're one of them.
You see lions, out on the savannah. They strike and they take the prey down, and they get that neck hold. Wolves, foxes, even wolverines, badgers. They all kind of hunt like this.
Yeah, if you ever want to understand what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is, it's basically, it just reminds me of like me and my brother trying to beat each other up when I was 9 years old, except now I know what to do.
Yeah.
But it looks like...
You're in your pajamas,
yeah.
Right? That's what a gi is, rolling around in the living room floor, and your mom's saying, you boys, stop it.
Yeah, it does, and it's probably the most funnest thing to do in the world. Man. You don't need the internet, you don't need a mobile device, you just need, two guys or two people, two women, whatever, it doesn't matter.
And I even showed you that little movement things that you can even practice shadow wrestle by yourself.
Yeah.
You just take those movements, you can put them together in an infinite number of combinations, and you basically keep you can keep your skill set sharp even when you don't have a partner, and it keeps you really mobile. Because one of the things that really differentiates really older people, like really old, from younger people is the ability to get up and down off the floor with ease. A fall will kill a lot of people.
It does kill a lot of older people, right?
My
Break a hip,
grandfather
infection.
broke his hip, he fell.
Infection.
And usually, then you can't move, you become immobilized. And what happens to the cardiovascular system, that's it.
So it's basically a death sentence.
You end up with a heart attack or a stroke.
Right.
Because you're not getting the lymph going, the blood circulating, because you're immobilized because of this broken hip. But why did the hip break? Well, a lot of times it's immobility and stiffness and this type of stuff. So something like Jiu-Jitsu can keep you pretty young if you go about it the right way.
Right.
It can destroy you. I know a lot of people that train, they go in and they tear into each other like a pack of wild dogs. That's not the way to go. Some schools are like this, and people are getting hurt a lot. But you can train in a way that is very sustainable, even into advanced age.
Yeah. Yeah, when I'm training with good guys, black belts and things like that, I rarely get injured.
Well, usually the upper belts have mastered this art of soft roll and relaxation.
Yeah,
they have the control, and they're not going to hurt you. It's always the white and blue belt guys. They're a little dangerous, especially the big, strong guys.
Yeah.
They don't know their own strength.
Yeah, and they can really hurt you. You were a wrestler in high school and in college,
yes, I was.
High level.
NCAA Division I.
To explain what that is to people, because that's no joke. Wrestling in America, especially Midwest America, is like a religion.
It is like a religion.
And the wrestling room is where they go to break men's wills, right?
It is a very tough sport. America has its own style of wrestling. It's called folk style wrestling. It's similar to freestyle, but there's more mat fighting. A lot of it's predicated on the ability to take someone down and put them on the mat, and you win the match by pinning their shoulders flat. And it's not that easy to do against a struggling person.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of technique to it, but there's also a lot of strength and power and explosiveness, and it's very hard training. It's quite demanding, very exhausting.
Very.
And they have no stalling rules. They just make you go at it. You can actually lose a match through stalling if the referee thinks that you're not putting your whole heart into going for it. So, and I did 4 years of that. I had my senior year was 18-2-1.
18-2-1. What weight did you wrestle?
158.
158. Okay.
I wrestled all through college, 167 and 158.
Okay. So I wrestled my junior year in high school. I changed high schools and I had no friends, and there was the other guy that had no friends in the class, and he said, "Brian, let's wrestle." And I was like, I've never actually done anything physical my whole life. And he took me into the wrestling room. And Steve, I remember they took us out for like a hill run, and they just crushed us. And then we went back to the wrestling room and wrestled for like 2 hours. And
that's the way the practices work.
I couldn't walk for days, and I went from this skinny little geeky guy, I literally just filled out. I must have put on, 10 pounds of muscle or something, but literally my shoulders got wider, everything about me changed, girls started noticing me, and it was just the weirdest thing. And
It was almost the same thing. I was kind of a reclusive, shy boy, small for my age, wasn't particularly athletic, and my father literally made me go out for wrestling. I mean, he made me under great protest, and I found I loved it. It was one of those things I had a good knack for. I wasn't good at gridiron football.
Right, too small.
What we call American football, gridiron.
Too small, team.
Too slow for track and field.
Okay.
Didn't have the endurance for cross country. Too slow for sprints. Too small for the field events. Basketball didn't have hand-eye coordination or, height. They didn't have gymnastics in those days, nor soccer. It was baseball, hand-eye coordination.
Okay.
But man, that wrestling, I had instant success with that. It says yes.
And it felt good.
It felt
It's
good.
good to get wins when you're a kid.
And thank God the old man made me do it. He tried to teach me boxing because he was a Navy boxer during World War II.
Okay.
He was actually the Pacific Fleet champ, Sam Maxwell.
No way.
Yeah, man. Flyweight. He was a tiny little farm boy from West Virginia. And they used to bring all the troop ships together in the Pacific, and they would set up these fights on the aircraft carriers. And he was the bantamweight champ.
That's crazy. Can you imagine that scene in the middle of the Pacific Ocean with
the
a
guys
ring?
would be up in the rigging looking down and cheering and getting really, really into the putting bets and who's going to win.
Did he have stories about World War II or did he not talk about it?
Many stories.
Really?
Yeah, I think it made a huge impression on him.
Really?
He was, they call that the Great Generation. And
was it? Or was it the Great Generation?
I've just heard it referred to that. But those old timers are some tough sons of guns. Those guys that during World War II, I don't think there's been another generation like that. What they faced, war of that scale, that was pretty something else. And
the Pacific was
he
nasty.
was in the Pacific on a destroyer escort. He joined as a 17-year-old. He lied about his age, and he shipped out of Hawaii. And his ship, the USS Waterman, received 13 battle stars. That means they were in 13 battles. They were kamikazed. And it's really interesting to note that this is what he said. He was part of that group, the very first group to go into Tokyo Bay at the end of the war. And they sent the little USS Waterman in there kind of like a sacrificial lamb to see if the Japanese were going to honor
because they might not have.
They didn't know.
Yeah.
They were supposed to put white flags and to identify all the batteries, all the gun emplacements protecting the harbor. And my dad said that when they looked there was like thousands of these flags just everywhere of all these guns trained on their little ship. And they just didn't know what was going to happen. They just chugged around that thing. And then he was part of the occupation force. He was there in Japan after the war.
With MacArthur,
So
right?
he saw a lot of stuff at, that phase of the war.
Because they had burned that city to the ground. I mean, it was pretty ugly over there.
He said he saw a lot of awful things, atrocities, and
Yeah.
he said he saw a lot of death and destruction during the war. He was in some of the major battles during the Pacific, and they supported some of those Marine Corps invasions, and it was it was pretty rough.
The Pacific was really hairy. I mean, you always hear about the stories in Europe, and those were hairy too. But the Pacific, it was just, man, relentless. And,
those Japanese were tough guys.
oh
man.
my gosh.
They were fighting for their homeland at that point.
Yeah.
At first they were invaders, but then they were fighting for their home. And man, those guys, I tell you, the Japanese army, the soldiers were really, really quite amazing.
Yeah, Iwo Jima. You hear about those stories, just like locked
They
up
were
in
willing to fight to the death.
Yeah.
They really were.
They have
They'd
that
fight to
code.
the last man.
I had Jocko Willink over here, the U.S. Navy SEAL, and I took him out on the HMS Belfast, and we made a short documentary film, and we were inside one of the gun turrets there, and he just looked around and he said, "Respect."
Yes.
He said, "Brian, imagine being in here during a battle. You can't see anything.
Nothing.
All you got to do is put these shells in here and fire, and at any moment you could just get slammed."
Just poof, gone. Yep.
He's like, "I'd rather be infantry somewhere in a trench than be there."
I'll tell you, man, being on that little ship out in the Pacific, wow, man, yeah. So he saw some real adventure, but he was a tough West Virginia farm boy that wanted to get the heck off the farm. His dad died when he was young, so he was living with his mother and this uncle on this farm. It was like almost like the Amish. They use horses to do everything. Wow. Yeah. They raised livestock and did everything by hand, and horses.
Right.
And he just wanted to get off the farm, man. So with the GI Bill, he was able to put himself through college, majored in entomology, if you can imagine. Yeah. And worked for the Federal Department of Agriculture his whole career.
Wow. And what did he teach you, your dad?
Well, resiliency, for sure. A real work ethic, because this was a guy that worked from the time he was just a little kid, and he knew what it was like to work. So he put that in my mind. My brother and I had jobs from the time we were like 12 years old. You know, I went to college, and I had all my tuition already saved up. He never would let us spend the money. It used to infuriate my brother and I. But I'm telling you, when I graduated from college, I had no bills. Of course, college was a lot cheaper back then.
Right.
It was a state college too. It wasn't like a real expensive college, but I knew at 12 I wanted to be a physical education teacher, or at least something to do with PE. And yeah, I had that all paid off, man. All I needed was extra money for books and, you know, stuff like that.
Well, he would have seen the post-Depression era, so he must have really valued
a dollar. He knew how to save. And he was saving too. He had a special fund. But he had this college education fund that he started when we were 12, the whole way through school. Every scrap of money we worked. And boy, I mowed lawns, and I worked at a truck car wash place, and I mean, I you know.
He wanted to spend it, but he wouldn't let you. And he wouldn't let you spend it.
I worked for a furniture moving company, you know, moving furniture and all this kind of stuff, and it was real interesting. That work ethic was really important, and I think he had a kind of he had a real confidence about him. You know, I wasn't nearly as confident as he was, but I think once you've been through the trauma of combat and you've seen war like he did, I mean, everything else pales in comparison to that, man.
Yeah. You think he had some PTSD, but people didn't call it that back then, did they?
He probably did, you know, because he saw some really traumatic things. He told me about being kept awake at night. One of the islands, there were so many bodies in the water, you would hear their heads hitting up against the bulkhead when he was sleeping, and it was the bodies being washed with the waves. There's just so many dead. I mean, that has to haunt you.
Yeah.
It has to haunt you.
It has to. If you see just human death on that scale, even if it's the enemy.
Remember the USS Indianapolis?
That one's
that aircraft carrier that sank, and that horror. All those guys that got shark attack.
Yeah.
He was part of that pickup where they picked people up.
And
he was part of that rescue.
And most of them were dead.
And just saw you know, half-eaten stuff. It was just awful. Just awful.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah, respect.
I'm sure that really, mad respect.
Respect for that.
I mean, he was a real pain in the ass. And he was one of these guys that was never satisfied, you know? No matter what you did, it was always something you could have done better.
So tough growing up, but you kind of respect him for what it was. All right, so you're in the wrestling room in college. And like, for people that don't understand, I mean, Daniel Cormier is fighting in the UFC. He's fighting heavyweight title. He's got to fight this weekend. And Daniel's shorter than the guys. He's usually fatter than the other guys, but he was an American wrestler.
He was American. I think it was college All-American.
Yeah, college All-American. And he said in that room, they try to break each other mentally. And he said there's guys that grown men cry in those rooms.
I cried my freshman year. I was a high school Harry. I was really good in my area. That freshman year in college, I just got crushed by the juniors and the seniors. They just beat the heck out of us. It's no accident, by the way, that if you look at the UFC and MMA, that almost every weight division, there's former NCAA wrestlers in top 10. You know, like that Henry Cejudo.
Cejudo, yeah.
Cejudo,
yeah, he was an Olympic wrestler, right?
He was an Olympic wrestler, NCAA champ, I believe. But you'll see, you know, John Jones, fantastic wrestler.
And the early
Andy Couture, you know, I mean, you just name anyone. Chuck Liddell, California State Wrestling Champ. It gives you a good base for going to MMA, because you got the mental toughness, you got the work ethic, and the skills of wrestling, the ability to put people on the ground, you know, like Khabib, really high level wrestler. When you can put the guy on the ground, that gives you a big advantage in a sport like MMA.
Yeah.
Because Jiu-Jitsu, we fight off our back, but it's really hard to play Jiu-Jitsu in MMA because of the rules, the gloves that limit the gripping, you know, the slipperiness. It's hard. I mean, there are guys that are very successful, Damian Maya,
Yeah.
to name one. But I mean, there's tons of guys that.
But if you can dictate where the fight is taking place, which
if you can dictate and put the guy on the ground,
yeah,
it's a huge advantage.
yeah, and we've seen like Khabib and Conor, and like you put him on the ground, and all your striking
GSP,
is
he had
when
one
you're
of
on
the
your
best
butt.
single leg takedowns I've ever seen, man.
GSP,
now he
yeah.
wasn't like a wrestler. He came from karate, but
He learned it later.
His wrestling he was so good the Canadian Olympic team wanted him to try out.
Yeah, and he trained with them, and that's how he got so good, and he shocked
He
people.
was really good.
Yeah, that's
But,
single.
so wrestling is a good skill to have.
Right. Now, most wrestlers don't go into jiu-jitsu, especially back when you did. That's rare. That was rare, right?
Back when I went in, this was like 89, 90.
Pre-UFC.
This is pre-UFC. There was no place to go with wrestling skills. What are you going to do? You could go into coaching, which I did. I coached high school for a couple of years. But what else were you going to do? If you were really high level, you could always try out for the Olympics if you could get sponsors. But back then, they didn't even have a really good organized program. There was the John DuPont who created the Foxcatcher.
Yeah.
That was the first time they had a really good program for high level wrestling. But that was a really unfortunate circumstance. My coach in college, Dale Bonsall, was the junior coach at Foxcatcher when all that went down.
No. There's a great movie called Foxcatcher that kind of...
Yeah, that was a complete fiction, by the way.
Okay.
They got that completely wrong.
Okay. Was he really a crazy guy?
Oh, yeah, John DuPont was bona fide crazy.
Okay.
But a lot of the movie was just a fiction.
Okay.
Just an interesting movie.
But he was one of the few guys that would actually fund wrestlers to actually focus on training for wrestling so they could go to the Olympics. And this is when...
He really helped USA Wrestling at the time.
Right.
And the guy, the real driving force there was that guy, David Schultz, the guy he shot.
Yeah.
Probably one of the best wrestlers the U.S. ever put out. Right up there with Dan Gable and probably John Smith. Those three really... I mean, there was so many good wrestlers, but those three really stand out in my mind as being even above the greats. And Schultz was certainly one of the more technical guys.
Okay, gotcha.
And it was a real shame. I actually went to a couple of the clinics that he taught and had a chance to actually meet and see this guy.
At Foxcatcher. Really?
Wow. My coach actually invited me down there.
Wow.
Unfortunately, I was kind of in family mode at that point. I graduated. I actually left the teaching field and got into the very early stages of personal training at that time in Philly.
Okay.
So it was really hard to get down there to practices.
Well, it's dangerous.
It'd be like driving across London,
Okay.
In the
But I
middle
mean, and DuPont ended up shooting David Schultz, right? And killing him, right?
Yeah, that was really sad.
It was really sad. What a crazy situation.
It was really nuts, man.
Okay, so then you get into jiu-jitsu, which again, this is...
About 89. I tried Muay Thai, Bondo, which is the mother art of Muay Thai.
Okay.
I did karate for a little bit. I'm just not a striker, I actually tried Kung Fu. It was actually a really good Kung Fu guy.
Okay.
And Kempo karate. And it was okay. I just wasn't really adept or real talented at striking arts.
Okay.
But in 89, I went to Hunter College and had my first Gracie experience. And it was like, wow, this is what I've been looking for. How do I learn this? I even said to Horry, what do I do? He says, you got to come to Torrance. So at that time, I had just set up my own gym, 1990 in January. So I owned my own business, and I was able to take off. And I also had space where I could set up some mats. And I invited some of my old wrestling friends, and just would invite anyone. And then I would study some videos, and I would just roll with anyone that would be willing to roll. And then I started taking trips out to California. I started going out so much, Horry started helping me save money by putting me up in his house. With Henner and Huron, he had like 6 kids running around. And Hoyce, the UFC champ, was like just a teenager himself, sleeping in the garage on this little mat. And Horry had just opened up his academy.
Did you ever imagine that this family would go on to shock the world and be known around the world?
No.
These guys that their names start with the letter R, but you pronounce it as if it's an H.
An H.
Horry went on to start the UFC, and it changed
everything.
Everything. And the whole world saw Gracie Jiu-Jitsu was the most effective martial art ever created.
It certainly was, if the other guy doesn't know any jiu-jitsu.
Yes.
I mean, that was what he wanted to show.
And they were always confident, weren't they?
They were very confident.
Because they were proving this in Rio de Janeiro for 20 years.
For many, many years.
But no one knew about
years.
it. 80 years.
Yeah,
but no one really knew about it outside of that country.
They had many, many fights down there.
Right.
And
On the concrete. I mean, there's old school stuff.
Old school stuff, man. Street fight. My teacher, Relson Gracie, I've heard different versions, but somewhere between 42 and 45 street fights. That's a lot of fights.
That's a lot of fun.
In the street. He was a wild guy.
Yeah.
He
And
liked to party.
Hickson had hundreds, right?
Hickson had hundreds.
And these names, like if you're not familiar, you go check them out because each one, and like I said, they start with an R, has a whole massive, incredible history.
Massive, incredible
I mean, Hickson,
history.
legend, fought at, one of the original shows that became Pride. Hoyce was the very first fighter in the UFC.
And he was specifically chosen because he was thin, he wasn't muscular, he was athletic, but he was just like a tall, rangy, skinny guy, and almost too nice, almost too friendly. He didn't have that.
Looks like the boy next
door. He
door.
started developing more of a killer instinct over time.
Later.
But in the beginning, and they picked him because he just didn't look like a fighter. He looked like, just this handsome young guy, but he didn't look particularly tough.
Because they could have picked Hickson.
They could have picked Hickson.
Which looks like a fighter.
He looks like a lion.
20, 30 pounds heavier.
Yeah, very muscular very
and just
fit. So
alpha.
They picked Thin Hoyce, who wore that baggy gi, and he just shocked the world with what the heck is this guy doing?
Right. And you can watch UFC 1. He won UFC what? 1, 2, 3, 4?
Yeah, I think 3 was the one he had to pull out.
Right. And then
where Keith Hackney, he had to forfeit the match.
Okay. And then
he had just spent too much energy against Chemo.
Right.
Leopold.
Yeah. And this original UFC.
And that Chemo was another one of those monsters, guys.
Yeah.
How could this guy like Hoyce,
Because the guy's like 230 pounds or something.
And he was massively strong, powerlifter guy.
And you trained
knew
Hoyce.
how to fight.
You trained Hoyce in cardio and strength before.
I was doing strength and conditioning for him.
Before the
Hoyce's
UFC.
wife worked for me at my gym, Maxwell.
Okay.
She was one of my trainers. She was putting herself through college. She was in medical school, actually. Not college, medical school. She was studying to become a podiatrist. And she was working for me. She worked for me at another club, the Society Hill Club. And then when I opened up my gym with my ex-wife, DC Maxwell, she came with me and she was teaching at my school.
Okay.
And then I introduced her to Hoyce. When I was going out to Torrance so much, they started sending to Hoyce. And he would stay with me for a couple of weeks at a time.
So you're deeply entwined with the Gracie family.
Yes.
UFC starts where people now know UFC
93.
is this $5-6 billion company now that's has fights every weekend. It's global. But back then
it was a shoestring.
It was this no holds barred pay-per-view phenomenon where they at first weren't even going to have a ref in the cage. They were going to
just let people go.
They were going to let people go to whatever death. And the very last time they put in John McCarthy, who was a cop. And they threw him in there, and you had Chemo Leopold dragging a cross in.
It's just crazy.
It was crazy. People's teeth flying out. One guy with one boxing glove.
Guy.
One boxing glove. And then Hoyce Gracie.
Right.
And they come in with all the Gracie brothers with their hands on their shoulders. It was like the tradition. And you.
Well, Horry actually went around to his friends. And at that point, I had already opened up my academy in, I guess it was late 1990. But I wasn't really qualified to teach. We called it a practice because I couldn't say I'm teaching, but I was teaching. I mean, someone had to do it because there was no one else around. There was no Renzo Gracie or Marcelo Garcia, or there was no one on the East Coast. It was just me.
Okay.
So he came around literally just kind of pitching people and throwing some money into this venture he had. And my wife and I put $10,000 in, which to us, we were fledgling business owners. I mean, I had no business background. I was classically trained as a PE school teacher. And my wife, when I met her, she was working, in real estate. She was a bartender and, working real estate. And, we didn't have any money, but we scraped up 10 grand, put it into Horry venture because we really had a lot of confidence in him.
And that was the UFC.
And he went to all these different people and cobbled together this money, and they did this thing in Denver, this UFC, on a shoestring. They used to, people used to send videos to Horry to see if they could get into the UFC. After the first one, everyone wanted to jump in on this.
Right.
So he'd look at the videos, and they would meet us at the hotel, these wannabe fighters that wanted to, and they'd give them a tryout in the ballroom of the hotel. And they would bring all his cousins and brothers and some of the higher ranked students. And they would just do a fight right in the ballroom.
Like on the carpet? Or
On the
mats?
carpet. On the carpet.
Just on the carpet?
Yeah.
Just
I
see if
remember
you-
Hillian just beating the snot out of this guy, Horry and Gracie. He's like one of the cousins.
Yeah.
Just beating the snot out of some poor fool.
Because this is back in the day when everyone on the corner mall martial arts thought they were the greatest in the world.
They
They'd
thought
use chi. I mean, there was really no proving ground. So people were really delusional and they never knew any better.
Well, they didn't know realism. You know, a lot of the karate was point fighting and pulling punches. And,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, boxers were always tough as shit. Wrestlers were always really tough. Judo players do it for real. You know, you had those guys, you know, realism. That, you know, you go full bore on each other in those sports. But still, no one had ever seen anything like this. And no one had ever seen the kind of ground fighting that the Jiu-Jitsu does.
The submissions and
And
that kind
people were just in a state of shock. But
Right.
it caught on so quick. But then you spawned this huge, I mean, there was so many fake guys coming up. Purple belts coming up from Brazil, and the purple belt mysteriously changing to black by the time they landed in Miami. And because there was such a huge
business.
well, there was such a huge demand for teaching because everyone wanted to do it after they saw Royce's successes.
Right.
So that's when Horry and Elliot came up with the concept of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Instructor Training Program.
Right.
And I was the first person to graduate from that.
To continue watching the rest of the episode for free, visit our website londonreal.tv or click the link in the description below.